And we are live. We are really excited today to have Katie Manty, who is the SVP of Omnichannel Marketing at Omnicom Health Group. We're going to be talking about how to drive customer experience with data. And Katie, I'm just going to start off by asking you what's on your mind.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to share with you what's on my mind. I work with a lot of marketing teams and clients and my own creative professionals and account teams. And, as we make more headway into what's known as AI as a technology, what I'm starting to hear, and I'm surprised to hear from some of my clients and colleagues, is, oh, well, the black box is just going to push out our marketing strategy. So we're not going to have to, figure out what channels, what content, and what to position to somebody. So that's what I'm hearing. And that's what I thought I'd share.
I don't know if I should be like, as a marketing person, like, should I be frightened by that or should be heartened by it? Because it's like that doesn't sound right. It doesn't,
certainly not, right?
How does it make you feel?
Yeah, it's like time out, right? To me, and I've been having these conversations seriously with clients who are excited to join the AI bandwagon, right? Everyone in corporate America's put AI on their goals, right? I'm going to make headway in AI this year. So of course we want to help them, and we want to think about, yes, how can you start to use AI to make some of your tasks simpler? But to me, it's really about, well, do you know what's going into this black box? And that's really where data comes in, right? And we've all got to figure out, how do we understand what's going into the black box? Is it all of the types of messages? Is it all of the channels? Is it for all of our customers? And one thing that I wanted to talk with you guys about is AI explainability, right? How do you take the 400 business rules in an Excel spreadsheet and try to translate that in a summarized view for a marketer, so he or she doesn't have to go through all and understand everything, but categorically you should know which channels are in this black box, which content types are in this black box, because that's inherently what's going to be the output.
Yeah, I think that's kind of.
We're all jumping in.
Everybody is jumping in. All right, so I'm jumping in first. So Katie, it's kind of a common notion that healthcare is behind in adopting technology, period, and it's inching because of the regulatory environment, privacy, etc. And all of a sudden, this amazing tool comes out, right? AI. So while other industries have to leap only so little to adopt AI tools, healthcare has to leap a lot. So how do you deal with it, even with the mind change and, understanding that you can actually manage, data processing without losing privacy and all this real and perceived issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in the work that I do and my teams do, we're often trying to promote disease education. A new drug is going to be launched, so a client needs help with, how do I inform different healthcare professionals, and then how do I inform patients, right? Because those moments that matter are when the patient and the doctor are going to be together, right? And how do we influence that with great content? And it's hard on the patient side, as we all know. There's more data privacy issues. How do you ask a patient to, let us email you or let us communicate with you? We have to kind of go back to the older days of contextual marketing and make some inferences for that side of the house. But with the healthcare professional, we still do have those IDs, the NPIs, that at least if we know who's on the other side of perhaps the digital or the offline channel, we can perhaps still thread together who and what their journey is, and again, also infer where are they on that marketing funnel. But I think having that NPI helps in the healthcare practitioner space, but does make it a little more difficult on the patient side.
How do you, okay, so obviously medicines and health tech, whatever, is so regulated. And so how do you interact with those regulatory requirements? Like when I use ChatGPT or whatever to do something, I just, whatever it says, I'm great. But like you could really cause a company some serious problems if you make a wrong claim or whatever.
Sure. It's got to be in a closed, secure environment. And when we're talking about like a next best message box that's labeled AI, let's step back and think, okay, it's labeled AI. It's using some perhaps machine learning to look at, okay, most of the people who click on this banner have these types of attributes. So if we see someone come in with these similar attributes, then we might say, I think this is the next best banner or message or content type. But again, you're right. It's not anything going out into the Wild West. It's in a closed black box that gets to be labeled AI. And sometimes that's a mislabel, but we want to join the bandwagon too.
Well, and so I'm going to jump back actually, and to your original point about strategy and whether humans will be sort of cut out of the loop. And it's interesting. First of all, I feel like that's sort of like saying that, like, back whatever 30 plus years ago, that Excel was going to make accountants go away or whatever. Like it's a tool like any other. But the interesting thing is that what we've seen is every time a new technological tool gets sort of brought into the mix, like at first it may be a competitive advantage, but eventually it becomes an ante to play. And so this idea that you are going to be able to just rely on ChatGPT or whatever to create strategy for you is ridiculous, because everybody will have access to that. And so in order to compete, yes, you will have to do that, but that'll just get you at the baseline. And so it's really going to be somebody coming up with more creative ideas and ways of using ChatGPT that nobody's thought of yet. And that is actually the thing that, LLMs and all this stuff are really bad at, is coming up with something that nobody's ever thought of before. Because I always joke that it's ChatGPT is like the collective stupidity of the internet. Mm-hmm. Like it can't go beyond it. So I just thought that was an interesting sort of point that you make of like people fear that the human is going to be taken out of the loop, but I just don't see it. That's so I don't know, interested in your thoughts on that, but.
Yeah. And again, put ChatGPT aside and all the large language models. What's going to differentiate a brand is first party data. Yeah. And I think as well, second party data, and starting to think about different relationships and how do you spin up and wind down temporary data sharing relationships. We might think about, we found there's been studies that Alzheimer's tends to skew to the wealthy. So then you think about, okay, so should I be talking to investment management firms to maybe co-market or talk and inform and educate people that could potentially have Alzheimer's disease, right? It's an example. It's still got to be explored. I'm not saying it's like the nirvana, but that's, to me, you have to think about new partnerships, because to your point, Jeff, if everybody uses the same thing, then there is nothing that's competitive. So it's really about the first party data that you have, that you're collecting, the enterprise is collecting. And again, right, first party data is what's inside our four walls as an enterprise. What do we know about our audience list? What are we collecting about their likes, their dislikes, their psychographics, their interests, their mindsets? But then perhaps, and I do think that second party relationships may play out in the coming years.
So as a follow-up to that, like I actually earlier in the conversation, I had written down this question about customized AI. And that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like not the AI where everybody's using the same large language model, but the AI where you're focusing in. And I think Mahal last week said something about like using small models in conjunction with the large language, local models, et cetera, and then having them combine the information. But I guess my question on customized AI is, how much are you seeing actually people doing that in your marketing space, as opposed, like, it seems like people are just trying to figure out, how do I use this at all? How are they, are there really companies that are, is it starting to be, are we getting past the early adopter phase of this customized, client specific AI type of stuff?
Well, I think what's even surprising, not even to talk about healthcare and pharmaceuticals, which is a bit behind, even the retailers don't always have the data completely unsiloed. And we still see examples, and you're still surprised, right? I mean, not everybody is Amazon and Netflix, right? With kind of the cream of the crop, where they must be putting it all into one warehouse, one data lake, and they can figure out everything that Katie does on all of their different business units, right? But the rest of our organizations, those business units just aren't even talking to each other. So I think, from a healthcare standpoint, of course there's challenges with trying to thread it together, but it is these smaller, think of like a data lake. And we are starting to see it, that again, it's around how good are you at collecting your first party data?
Yeah.
And how good are you taking all of your marketing channels, your email, your mail, your sales calls, your website? Do you know, or can you determine, right, from a probabilistic standpoint, who's on the other side of that digital device? And I think the pharma marketing teams are getting better. But yeah, there's lots of room for improvement. I think we're just at the tip. But I am seeing teams that are using their technology and putting as many of their interactions as they can into a common data lake, and then we can do analysis on that journey.
Well, I also think that, as you mentioned, nobody cancels strategy, right? So as you've collected all the first party data and you understood everything you could understand, right, given the technical capabilities, then comes the infamous so what, right? So how can we act on this data? And given that the data is now near real time, how can we course correct better than everybody else? How can we position ourselves to gain advantage by knowing better and moving faster? How much of that notion do you see in the market?
Yeah, I think that's the next step. And I've been a real big proponent of dashboards and figuring out the couple of KPIs that are going to show engagement. I take the underlying hypothesis that the more engagement you have, the more sales you'll get, right? I mean, that's just a common, hopefully sales and marketing can agree a little bit on that one, right? So to me, it's trying to take all of this data that we're collecting and start measuring channel by channel as best we can, and then at an omni-channel or total customer experience level where we can, when we can thread together the identity of someone, what is engagement looking like? How many touches online and offline does it take to get that first prescription written? That second one, the 20th one.
So we've talked about AI, and I know that's the hot thing, but one of the things that actually has been coming up in our conversations, Jeff, Elena, and I, has been like the power of just automate, like non-AI based automation, non-AI based tools. I can only imagine that you know, it's probably hard right now to steer people away, but like if you aren't doing some of the blocking and tackling, like why are you using the fancy thing? What are your thoughts on where is that line? Where should that line be? Where do people think the line should be? Where is it actually,
Yeah. Are we still on an analytics maturity curve, right? Foundational, descriptive, diagnostic, prescriptive, predictive, prescriptive, right? I think we're still in foundational.
Yeah. Well, and that, it's funny you say that because that's what I've been talking about. Like, I built a analytics function at Cracker Barrel like over the last couple of years, partly because we had great data engineering and then we had finance and there was like nothing in between, right? And a lot of the conversation, I actually remember I put together a slide and it said descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, and I put an arrow at the top and I said, we are here, because so many of the problems, to your point, are just we don't even have things set up right to do the basic descriptive stuff or even to get the dashboard put together.
Yeah, and it's, to me too, at least in the healthcare space where I'm playing right now, there's not a lot of data. So it's hard to make these custom AI systems really have good recommendations. It's
Right.
not thousands, millions of people buying the same book, and then you can go at a zip code level and infer what kind of household income they have. So the next person with that household income, hey, you might like this book. We just don't have that same velocity same volume of
Right.
data, right?
Yeah.
So
how do we build that? I mean, so in my biotech work, that's certainly something I think about is like, how do we get the data we need? And it's very clear to me that is actually, it's more, to some degree, it's more about the logistics of generating the data than it is about the actual machine learning. I wrote an article a couple of years ago saying there's probably there could be a grad student who has the perfect predictive engine for picking the drug, right out of the, out of the air. And we would never know because we can't get the data. We can't test the hypothesis easily. In this healthcare space, what needs to happen to get to the point where we do have that data? Is it just time? Do people need to be more collaborative?
perhaps, right? I mean, it's that follow the money. Who's going to benefit the most? Again, are there some interesting partnerships with insurance companies who perhaps, right? Like who should send out hey, don't forget to fill your prescription, right? Like a bunch of people benefit from that. So should they be collaborating more closely and sharing their data to kind of send those refill your prescription type text? I think time will tell. And again, like what I consult and advise to clients is collect the data now, because that's what's going to be your differentiator in 2 to 3 years. And if you're not collecting it now, know that your competitors are, and even your non-competitors, right? Like the ones like that perhaps are adjacent that you're not thinking about, they're collecting it. So then what kind of interesting partnerships are going to be demanded, right? If you think about a pharma manufacturer that's making a drug and a CVS that's sending us those types of text, how are they going to make sure that they're sending those texts, but then do they have the drug in stock? So perhaps there will be something that breaks along that supply chain that then causes some different relationships.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Collect as much as you can now because the regulatory environment is changing, right? In front of very eyes, and what's legal today may be legal and legitimate, right? Or certain states are taking actions and it's no longer legitimate on one hand, but on the other hand, the interoperability play, right, is not exactly catching up all that fast. So you kind of have to, if you have access, you should take it. So I'm fully understanding where you're coming from.
Well, we are at that time of the show where ChatGPT wants to ask a question. Actually, I usually do 2 questions, and it'll be interesting to see because we usually get the same answers. I always start off and say, would you rather have thought-provoking or absurd first?
I have to choose one. I guess I'll go It's thought provoking.
Okay, usually people go absurd first, which is weird.
Okay. I have enough absurdity in my life.
So thought-provoking was, I'll use this one. It says, what's the most creative way you've seen data used to surprise and delight a customer?
Creative.
You thought-provoking, I did it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, to me, like, you think about, again, some of these third-party aggregators. I worked for one prior to coming to Omnicom. They just collect so much amazing data, like wine aficionado, right? And what can you do with that? But again, from a wealth management standpoint and a financial standpoint, perhaps a considerable number of people in your segment are wine aficionados. So you figure out, like, oh, rather than giving everybody, the golf message, because we thought all rich people like golf, let's figure out how we might segment out a wealthy segment and figure out who really does like golf. And maybe there's a smaller contingency or subsegment that likes wine, and we should try to see if that drives engagement.
Right. All right, so maybe related is this is ChatGPT's question, so don't hold me.
Jeff's already putting all kinds of
what I caveat this, and it says, what's the weirdest correlation you found in customer data, a la pineapple pizza lovers and loyalty?
Right. So. Weirdest correlation. Oh
Wait,
my
sorry,
God.
what's the pineapple pizza thing? What is it?
It has it's like a multi-part question. It was what's the weirdest correlation you found in customer data, pineapple pizza lovers and loyalty points? Question mark. So
I see. That's their like.
That was an example. I don't know. Maybe that's not a fair one. The other one was, I mean, if you prefer, I've got, if you don't have to actually answer any of these questions if you don't want to, but if you had to describe your job to a 5-year-old using only animal analogies, what would you say?
Oh, okay. That one's hard, but it's like you're looking for the white horse among a bunch of zebras, and you're trying to figure out who might have this disease that yet none of the diagnostics are telling us, but we're trying to figure out how do we find that white horse among a bunch of zebras. That's what I do is try to figure out those customers.
I thought that was well done. I think you
nicely done. Yeah. So actually, I want to, since you're talking about the horses and the zebras, so I want to get a sort of more serious follow-up question is, your company's called Omnicom. It's omni-channel, and I vaguely know what that means. It's like, okay, you want to cross your email with your Google searches, with your whatever. But from an expert point of view, what is the omni channel? What does that mean to you as an omni channel?
Sure. We've probably all heard, again, like, how do you get the right message to the right customer on the right channel? So omni-channel marketing, and I feel it is synonymous with customer experience, because it is really when you know the individual and oh, they had a call with sales, then they read the email, which clicked them to the web, which then drove them to go to a conference, and they stopped at our booth and got the tchotchkes. Mm-hmm. To me, if I can paste that together and I know exactly it was, Dr. J. Smith, and she did all of those things in a certain sequence, that's omni-channel to me. But it's hard, right? When you still want to do presence on Facebook, but Facebook is never going to tell you that, oh yeah, Dr. J. Smith saw this ad 7 times. They're just going to tell you, oncologists like that Dr. J. Smith may be in the group, might have seen this ad, 7 times.
How do you, so this whole idea of omni-channel marketing, I think, has been around for some time, and it's been kind of morphing and changing. And, it was like, I don't know, I'm thinking, Elena, back to our Nabisco days when we called it integrated marketing or whatever. It's changed.
Channel, remember, it used to be multi-channel, yeah.
whatever, 360, and then
I feel like I get the benefit of having jump stepped over all of these things.
But so what do you, I guess my question is, and maybe this is like a little bit of like we're in the predictive part of the of the discussion, is where do you think this idea of omni-channel marketing and so forth is going next?
Where is it going? I think we're going to go back a little bit, at least in the healthcare space, and especially with the patient. We are going to go back to multi-channel because of the limits of really how you can identify somebody. And you're going to have to think about context. Okay, if someone's on an American Cancer Society page, then why might they be there? Are they interested, in learning more about some oncology drugs, right? And that you can do. But again, you may never know exactly who that patient was. You're going to have to run more probabilistic inferences on that.
It's really interesting. I mean, the whole healthcare angle. So, I come from a restaurant marketing kind of background where we were just, we didn't have a loyalty program, but they now do. And, so you've got all that first party data coming in. You also have the e-commerce platform. So you have people's buying behaviors, but you also have an opportunity to sort of directly impact them by, by those experiences. So I'm fascinated by this whole, in that healthcare space. It's such a different, I mean, there's obviously some things that are the same and some things that are just so and different. I think it's really an interesting. So yeah, I don't have a question there. I'm just in awe.
Yeah, I think I have some great slides to talk about multi-channel, the integrated marketing, omni-channel. And it's like, you got to strive for the moonshot, the omni-channel, but when you have certain channels that just are never going to be connected,
right?
That doesn't mean you should give up and say, oh, well, forget it, we're not doing omni-channel. But, you could call it multi-channel when Facebook is part of your customer journey that you're trying to join, because it is going to be disjointed.
Yeah.
So we have had this conversation in other contexts about like different generational, I mean, with respect to technology, right? There's just very, very different generational uses. And, Gen Z, Gen Alpha obviously have very, very different relationships to those of us who are old enough to remember when there was no internet, or when the internet was just something that Al Gore was working on or whatever. So can you talk a little bit about that intergenerational? Do you see it as being like, do you have to really, for this omni-channel in health, well, also on top of it, generational healthcare differences are going to compound that, right? Like, I have different healthcare needs than my parents, than my kids, right? And so it seems to me that is actually going to be a major factor in how your work is done. Is that a fair assumption? Or
I think that's a fair assumption, although I will say back in my finance days, we were always surprised. Like, you could not make the typical stereotypes that you just assume that, oh, only the boomers want to be on the phone calls. So that's what I've learned, I think, in my marketing, that as marketers, we try to segment and we try to classify so that we can do our jobs to the most effective, but you can't really make any inferences. It is interesting with the younger, do they seem as privacy concerned as we are? I don't always get that notion in talking, smaller data points that.
I mean, they grew up on TikTok and Facebook and whatever.
Exactly. And we were the ones who put them there when they were little.
But by the same token, not as many people have, maybe the, the concern, because they don't have the medical condition. I mean, some of them obviously have, but they don't have as much going on in some cases. Obviously, there are many people with. So we are, and as usual, time flies by, as I told you it would, Katie, when we first started, but we are coming up on the half hour here. And as we warned you, our ritual here is to go around and say one thing and always make the guest, jump in first so they don't have much time to think about it. It's just kind of a fun thing for us to watch, to watch you try to think on your feet. But what's one thing that you want to leave the audience with?
So I invite marketers to collaborate with IT and build relationships with your data partners and your analytics teams. Try to learn as much as you can. I know you don't have time because you're doing too many tactics and you just keep trying to, invite people to all of your channels. But I worked on this as part of my MIT Sloan degree, how there was miscommunication between business and IT, and it still goes on. So do whatever you can to, try to build those relationships with IT and data partners.
I will jump in, and before I go next, Katie, what is the best place if people want to reach out and connect with you? What's the best place to reach you?
Sure. katie.manty@sloan.mit.edu. That's a great place to meet me. I forward those emails.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think there's so many things that I think I'm thinking about sort of the future marketing, but I think the one thing that sort of, you said something about we may need to go back. And I think it's interesting, this idea that as technology moves forward and maybe some of the things that didn't necessarily work as well as they promised in the past will actually start to work better than they did before. And I think there's sort of an interesting opportunity there to say, hey, let's not just assume all those older marketers are dinosaurs and don't know what they're talking about, and see if we can sort of tap into their knowledge of, hey, these are the things we've tried in the past, and connect them with. So maybe it's that, maybe to take your IT and marketing connection, I'm going to be old marketer, younger marketer, let's connect those folks, because I think there's a lot there in terms of sort of understanding how things work and not letting marketing become sort of almost like a technician kind of role. So, and I will pass it over to Elena.
Yeah, and I'll pick it up right there from the technician type of roles. What really strikes the chord with me is the need to gather data, understand the data, and draw the strategic so what, and then act on it. And to me, if you take one piece of this chain and you're excellent at it and you're no good at the rest, you're not going to win, right? The win lies in putting this whole chain together.
And my one thing is, as the one non-marketer in the bunch here, is this complexity, trying to start, thinking in this kind of three-dimensional chess kind of way of how, not just how am I getting my message out, but how am I getting the message out over time? How am I warming up that relationship across all of these activities? And that it's I think I've started thinking about this as I've been, doing this podcast and reading, but it's really complex. And I think it's great that you guys are thinking about it. And then on top of it, in your particular space, Katie, of the healthcare, is how does that all interact with this regulated, privacy heavy, and for good reason, how do you regulate that? I mean, we all know that, that classic story about the Target ad and it's how are we preventing the next, the story for the next generation happening across this. So Katie, I just want to thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. Maybe we should start doing hour-long episodes, because it always goes by. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to chat with you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.